Welcome back to another video. Today, a longer video than what I've been doing lately. Lots of shorts on lots of different topics. But lately, I've been in the process of developing a new program for rating organizational health for businesses and beyond. So what I'm going to do is introduce this program to you, which is still, by the way, in development. I'm still seeking collaborators and ideas, and I'm putting it through a bit of beta testing at the moment. So if you yourself have a business of your own, or at the very least, if you work for a business where you kind of have a say in what goes on there, you're at least on the middle management level, then this might be for you, and your business may be interested in me going through this program with you to make sure that you're really on the right track morally, socially, and economically and financially as well, because there's actually quite a strong correlation between doing the right thing and providing a quality good or service, and putting the customer's needs as a priority and being successful with your business, right? Lots of businesses shortcut lots of these criteria that I'm going to go through, and it may pay off in the short to medium term, but in the long term, they're absolutely doomed. So this program is meant to fortress your business or your organization or your church or whatever it is for the long haul, and to make sure that you are serving the good. Because remember, there are two necessary parts of any business or organization. That's to make money on one hand, of course, but there's also to provide something of value to a community or to mankind. Okay. So this system is meant to maximize that on all fronts, foreseeable and unforeseen. There are other systems that have been devised, a few of which I am aware of, but insofar as I can tell, I've hit pretty much all of the criteria that the others have, at least all the important ones. If you know of one of these systems and I'm really missing out on a key criterion, please let me know in the comments. And if you feel like you have something much larger to contribute to this project, feel free to contact me at bwfrost@outlook.com or through the contact form on my website at overthoughtandunderstated.com. So on to this system, which I call DEItox, DEI-tox. So on one hand, it is very capable of detoxing your organization from the infection that is diversity, equity, and inclusion. But it does a lot more than that, and it can also just kind of further safeguard you against that, and but really focus on the things that matter more proactively. So I'll just read the introduction that I have, and I'll go through each of the criteria that I use to rate the overall health of an organization. So the following is a tier list of idealized categories for rating the moral, social, and economic health of an organization, applicable to businesses and corporations of all sizes, nonprofits, churches, and academic institutions alike. These categories are not intended to be absolute. Rather, they present average ranges into which an organization could fall depending on the tally of their scores. Each tier level marks an organization's style of valuing and dealing with a variety of topics organized into 16 or more criteria. I currently have 16 that could expand. And some of the categories could collapse into each other because there is some interconnectedness among them. Conceivably, most organizations will contain a mix of criteria from different levels, but will average out to cohere with one level more than the others. With some criteria, namely those first few, which focus more on context rather than content, carrying more weight than others in the analysis. There's a mix of empirical and intuitive techniques employed via consultation and self-assessment for determining how an organization relates to each criterion, as well as determining which tier suits the organization best overall, giving you a starting point from which to improve. I also have not included in this talk today about each of the criteria, but I have several solutions for correcting any shortcomings in each of these categories. And that would be part of the consultation process. And I'm also going to be making a playlist of videos describing more and more detail of each part of this system for the future. So stay tuned for that as well. The traits or criteria used for scoring health are as follows. The first one is called, it's a concept that I devised called organism archetype. So an organization is a type of organism that needs purpose, structure, and nourishment. What is the organization, broadly speaking? What does it value? And therefore, what does it need? Now, this category is something I'll explain in more detail in a future video, but this is kind of the sum of all of the other parts combined. All of the other criteria combine to form the organism archetype. So more on that later. Second is philosophical attitude. Usually unconsciously, an organization will have a way of understanding raw concepts aligned with certain philosophical schools of thought, and therefore formulating a basis of assumptions for grounding what it knows and learns. So being someone who's formally educated in philosophy, this is another very broad category that I see in organisms, or organisms, that's a slip, organizations that I observe and ones that I have worked for as well. This is about identifying the philosophical flaws and strengths of the organism or organization and how to use that as sort of a basis of its belief system to improve. Third is political orientation. An organization may have a political bias or preference one way or another. Sometimes one forms over time. This is natural, as like attracts like in the hiring process. If it's strong enough, this bias will impede on productivity and become a point of focus on its own. Even if there is no distinguished bias or preference within the organization, the OA or organization archetype may take on psychometric characteristics, that's personality trait characteristics commonly seen in particular political groups based on its style of authority and any other values it more consciously holds. So the political orientation aspect of this is kind of complex. It's philosophical, it's psychological, it's about personality traits as well, which is another one of my areas. So even if an organization doesn't have a political preference on the whole, it still may be prone to adopting one given that it values a certain type of authority, if that makes sense. Fourth criteria is religious tolerance. An organization will have a certain openness or lack thereof to its members' spiritual development. It may have a religious preference incorporated into its foundation. If not, it will still hold true to some general concept of God or ultimate authority by its marking certain ideas, topics, and methods as sacred and others as evil or against the rules. 5, leadership style. An organization will have a style of leading and communicating. In a hierarchical structure, there will be a degree of disconnect between the top and the bottom. The more horizontal the structure is overall, the more communication there is between the leaders and the ground level workers, and the more direct influence the workers have on decisions that are made by leaders. And generally, the more aligned all functions are with the OA's purpose. Leadership will also be more or less adaptive to individual work preferences, which can be corrected in the hiring process. See trait 7 for more, which we'll get to. 6, what is the nature and quality of the product or service being provided? What does the organization actually contribute to mankind? To what extent is quality a priority? Doing something as well as you can for its own sake. What are the benchmarks and methods for maintaining that quality standard? Number 7, hiring criteria. What takes priority in deciding whether an applicant will be a good fit for the organization or not? It will usually be some combination of merit, competence, and character, with some organizations valuing one over the others, some valuing two, others valuing all of them, others valuing none, right? 8, the roles of human resources / administration. I lump them into one category. What are the defined roles of the administrative team, especially those beyond mundane organizational functions, if any? Does HR admin possess any authority? And if so, what is the nature and degree of that authority? 9, stance on diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI. To what extent has the organization been infected by this ideology? Or to what extent is it predisposed to infection based on its other values and or passivity regarding DEI and the philosophies connected with it? 10, company culture. Does the organization promote a certain kind of image or lifestyle that it expects its members to adopt as part of their identity? Is conformity enforced or is it voluntary? How do members generally respond? 11, conflict resolution. Does the organization promote a certain kind of image? I'm sorry, reading the description of the one before. Conflict resolution. Is there a formal process for resolving conflict? And if so, what is it? And which style of authority is employed in those moments? Does it treat symptoms or does it seek out root causes? Is it more reactive or is it more foresightful and preventative? 12, management of the Pareto principle or the 80-20 distribution of productivity. So in an organization, this is more psychometric, psychological, okay? In an organization whose members represent the general population, 20% of the people are responsible for 80% of the productivity. This is a psychological fact. You can look it up. And another 30% are responsible for routine maintenance, which accounts for that other 20% of productivity. I'm going to do a particular video on this, by the way, citing sources as well. While about 50% of members produce a net negative effect on productivity. What, if any, standards are there to ensure productivity, from the hiring process to firing, to the degree of purpose that its members have toward the work and beyond? 13, work-life standards. Is membership to the organization conducive to a good life? Do most members find genuine purpose in the work? To what extent does the work itself contribute to or detract from individual well-being? Rather, do most jobs constitute a means to an end relationship with the organization? And if so, what steps are taken to ensure that individual life does not suffer due to work commitments? 14, maintenance principles. Is there adequate attention to maintaining the moving parts of the organization, or does the potential for short-term loss prevent vital maintenance from taking place? This is huge. Although it's not one of the main factors that I use to score, it's further down the list. This is something that I see in pretty much all businesses that are failing or have major problems. They're not maintaining all the moving parts because the leaders or the business owners are too busy focusing on working on the business itself rather than maintaining those smaller micro parts. 15, where applicable, COVID compliance. To what degree did the organization comply with COVID restrictions imposed on the federal, state, and municipal levels for cities? To what degree does the fear factor from this and for other future such events remain ingrained among leaders, administrators, and members? To what degree is the organization vulnerable to making the same mistakes in the case of another such event? 16, overall, what is the approach to facing ethical challenges? Is there or is there not a set of moral principles that underlie that process? What is the quality of those moral principles? Are they aligned with truth? And is truth and goodness the priority when ethical challenges come up? Or is it just a game of who knows who, nepotism, power play among people at the top? And then 17, I have examples. So I'm not going to go through how each of the tier levels relates to each of these topics just yet. I'll just briefly describe how I came up with the rating system, the tier list, if you will. So I'll share video. So I've organized the levels in terms of a color code. I figured that was probably the best visual way to distinguish between them. So purple is the ideal workplace. I'll just go through the OA description real quick. The organization acts as a spiritual entity unto itself, which prioritizes quality service, awareness of itself and the world, and its orientation toward serving the highest good in every case. It's not fazed by the need for short-term sacrifice, as its vision and execution is able to fully sustain itself. And most businesses are not going to fit into the purple category, unfortunately, because you kind of have to be directly making your purpose spiritual well-being to fit somewhere in purple. So hopefully we would want all churches, all spiritual organizations to fit into this category. But alas, humans have egos, and it's actually far from the case. There's a threshold between integrity above and materialism below that actually a lot of churches and spiritual organizations fall below that threshold into the realm of materialism. So they fundamentally see the world the wrong way. They fundamentally value the wrong things. The OA of the blue level, which is a healthy and principled organization and generally the highest that any material-based good or service organization can reach, is healthy and principled. The organization acts as a conscious organism which has foresight and safeguards for most errors. So it has reason and integrity to it, and it is doing something that creates very much a positive effect in the world. It's aware of its role, and it does whatever it can to maintain quality. Green is tolerant and efficient. The organization acts as a functional organism which values quality of service over expedient ends in most cases. It can be a little materialistic and it could be very successful in terms of finances, but it may have some shortcomings when it comes to, treating everyone well and providing good quality of life for everyone involved. Putting the customer's needs as a priority, et cetera, et cetera. But nevertheless, green has, I would say, the most potential for overall financial success, even though there are two levels that score higher than that in terms of moral and social health. But the sky is the limit, and time is of no factor for a purple organization. It's meant to transcend time. It's meant to be bulletproof against society's cultural value fluctuations. So just below the green threshold is the yellow. We're starting to deteriorate here. The yellow OA, this organization acts as an organism that has a relative handle on its own survival, but it does not flourish beyond that, even if it makes a lot of money. It may make a lot of money in a short period of time because it's taking full advantage of a cultural trend. But the lack of longevity means that it's probably still ill, or at least prone to a short life. Decisions generally lean toward expedient gain at the expense of sustainability and quality. As a result, treatment toward customers and employees suffers. Now we're getting pretty bad. Orange is infected and fragile. The organization acts as a competitive and unintentionally immoral organism desperate for survival. There is a cutthroat nature to its cause as well as to its culture because it is not self-sustaining. And red is the lowest of the low, a terminally ill organization, which acts as an intentionally immoral organism and produces a net negative effect on every measure. For example, a company that was created from the ground up to serve a DEI or postmodern program, no matter how much money and resources go to waste, it wrongly believes that it is a force for good based on its succumbing entirely to the culture-wide value crisis in which we find ourselves. So that is an overview of the DEItox system. Let me know if there's anything that you can contribute to it in order to help me out, including putting your own business or idea for a business on the chopping block. If you'd like me to consult you in this beta testing period for a massively reduced price, I am here for that. More videos to come on more detail of the individual parts of this system that is still in development. Hope you enjoyed this one. See you in the next one. Cheers.